results were twofold. First, unfortunately, there is still no understanding of Russia's motives in making the decision to repulse Georgia's aggression, and in making the decision to recognise South Ossetia and Abkhazia as subjects of international law. This is deplorable, but not fatal, because in this world things change. That's the first point. Another point is much more positive. Even though the EU countries were somewhat divided on this issue, a reasonable and realistic approach prevailed. Some countries called for some imaginary sanctions and punishments, but it didn't happen, and I think Europe, primarily the European Union, is better off this way.
Some say that by recognizing South Ossetia and Abkhazia, Russia isolated itself from the international community. Do you agree?
There is no isolation. Russia doesn't want to be isolated, and in fact, it is impossible to isolate Russia. The fact of the matter is, after this recognition, we should all consider the security architecture we want to have in our complex world in the years to come. It is totally obvious to me that the events that started with Georgian aggression on August the 8th made this issue very urgent. The former security architecture proved itself ineffective.
Still, some say there may be sanctions like expulsion from the G8 or a ban on Russia joining the WTO. In case these measures are taken, what will be Russia's response? Common Europeans are concerned that a hot summer in the Caucasus may be followed by a cold winter in Europe.
You know, with sanctions, nothing is ever that simple. Usually sanctions are like a double-edged sword. I think the decision made by the EU demonstrates how dangerous the way of sanctions is. Common sense prevailed, and the result is obvious. Now, as for other international instruments, say the G8, it's not capable of functioning without Russia. Moreover, G8 countries now realise that apart from countries like, say, China and India, without using the so-called outreach format, many decisions made by the G8 won't be fully effective, to say nothing of decisions made without Russia. Thus, the G8 will not survive without Russia. Even if those countries try to come together separately, this will only have a negative effect on the world situation. The matter of the WTO is a particular economic subject. Indeed, we would like to join the WTO, but not at any cost. We have been negotiating on this issue for a long time, and unfortunately, these talks haven't been universally successful. Our position was simple. Unless we make a deal soon, we are going to pull out of some treaties that impose certain restrictions on us with regard to the WTO. We are probably going to go ahead with these steps unless we see progress in the WTO process shortly. Russia's membership of the WTO is not just something that Russia alone needs. Other economies depend on this as well. We'll see how things will pan out. As for other levers of influence, I don't think we should expect a cold winter or anything of that nature. Nobody wants to see that.
What I meant was hydrocarbon supplies.
Yes, I know what you were hinting at. Of course, we are going to fully honour all the obligations Russia took upon itself as the main supplier of hydrocarbons to Europe.
Analysts believe that the Caucasus crisis turned the last page in Russia's post-Soviet history and became a starting point for a new world order. Something you have just mentioned to a degree. What kinds of relations Russia wants to have with its closest neighbors, like Ukraine, and the world in general?
Our relations with all countries will be based on the same criteria. You are right, I have already said that the August events demonstrated how imperfect the current security architecture is. We need to recreate it according to the reality we face today. Some time ago, I listed 5 principles I will follow in Russia's foreign policy. I'd like to repeat them now. First, Russia will fully abide by the standards of international law that define relations between civilized nations. Second, Russia believes the world should be multipolar. It thinks a unipolar world dominated by one state, no matter which one, is unacceptable. Third, we are naturally interested in developing normal, friendly relations with all nations in Europe, in Asia, with the United States, with Africa, with all nations on the planet. These relations will be as deep as our partners want them to be. Fourth, I believe that protecting our citizens' lives and dignity, no matter where they are, is an absolute priority. This is another priority for Russia's foreign policy. And finally, the fifth principle is that Russia, like any other state, has certain regions it will pay particular attention to. These are regions of our privileged interests. We are going to have special, cordial, long-term relations with the states in these regions.
Is there a danger that the recognition of South Ossetia and Abkhazia will provoke separatist tendencies in other parts of the Caucasus, say in Dagestan or in Ossetia?
I see no danger here unless these matters are worked on by people abroad who create various scenarios to dismember Russia.
What were the main conclusions you made, or maybe lessons you learned, after the latest crisis in the Russia-US relations?
I don't think this was a full-blown crisis, something comparable to the Soviet period. Yet there are tensions. We definitely didn't want these tensions to start. These tensions were the result of a somewhat unwise policy of the United States pursued with regard to Georgia. At a certain point, it gave the Georgian leader the impression he was free to do whatever he wanted, and there would be no retribution for his actions. It was as if he had carte blanche to use whatever means he would choose. It is clear now what results this produced. I think today some people in the US are frustrated that their virtual project called Free Georgia failed. Its leader discredited himself. Its regime is facing a crisis. The situation is tense. The sooner our American partners figure out what is what in this matter, the better Russian-US relations will be. On our side, we are open to restore them in the best way possible. We are willing to have a completely normal relationship with the United States of America.
In an interview with Italian TV channel Rai, Dmitry Medvedev also talked about how relations between Russia and NATO were affected by Moscow's recent actions.